me? I told you I'll give you a virtual tour, right? You've seen what we're experiencing right here live from Nakuru County, or should I say Nakuru City. From the scenic Lake Nakuru Lodge, that's where we are, and you're just in time for the Monday Report Town Hall session. We're talking about HIV and AIDS here. Did you know that 40 people between the ages of 15 to 24 get infected every day? That makes it 2 every hour. This is a crisis we're not talking about, and this is the chance that we have to speak about it. How do we change that narrative? How do we make it seem as serious as it is? Can see a lot of your feedback already coming through at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Hashtag Monday Report. Let me introduce my guests real quick before we get into this conversation. Starting from my farthest right, Wilson Opudo, HIV Prevention Care and Treatment Specialist. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you.
Rebecca Nyankiea, Program Officer, Adolescents and Young People, National AIDS Control Council. Thank you for making time. And Dr. Mike Ekisa, County HIV AIDS and STI Control Program Coordinator. Asante sana for making time. Let's set the context for this conversation. So listen to this. 1 in 5 female university students are reportedly engaged in relationships with older men or women in exchange for money, a lifestyle that is termed as the sponsor culture. That's according to the study conducted by Busara Center for Behavioral Economics in 2020. So the rising trend in the country is largely attributed to a mix of factors, including unemployment, misplaced ambitions, and the diminishing role of parents in their children's lives. And as Marianne Nyambura now reports, HIV stakeholders in the continent have been now saying that they're concerned about the role of these sponsors in the spread of HIV and AIDS. Watch.
Monday morning in Nakuru, we meet a 26-year-old lady so as to conceal her real identity. Let's call her Betty. Betty is making breakfast and doing a few house chores before she can rush to work. She is among hundreds of young girls in the country who are involved in relationships with older men, commonly known as sponsors. Despite having a job, she chose this route.
For the past 2 years, nimekuwa na sponsor. Nilikuwa na my last born sister, alikuwa anasoma. Alinisaidia kumsomesha, na pia mtoto wa sister yangu second born amekuwa akisoma. So haijakuwa ati si challenge up and down kutomuona. Nilipata plot pipeline 50 by 100. Na pia kukaa na yeye ilikuwa hakuwa anataka kunionyesha kwa wengine. Ilikuwa ni kama kitu secrets.
Not too far away, we meet another woman. Let's call her Christine. Christine knows all too well the risks involved in these relationships, and though many choose to remain silent over this culture that is creeping in, she shares her story.
Kwangu mimi nilikala sponsor taka alikuwa mwa mtu kwa mwezi, akanijengea, akanisaidia sana pia maana nilisoma, nilijengewa kwetu.
The two women only represent a fraction of thousands of both young and older men and women in the country who choose this path. But the two know all too well the risks involved.
I had that fear at first when it comes to HIV, STIs, hizo magonjwa. But we got tested.
Saa ingine wezi mpigia, wagoja kupigie. Tena uogopa, weza shikwa na mkewe. Tena ujue kwamba ukiona sponsor, wewe siwe peke yako.
The sponsor culture has slowly but surely become engraved in Kenyan society. A simple yet complex web involving older men, women, and the youth who choose to discreetly remain in relationships owing to certain factors. Tonight, we tell you about this grim reality and why it is a growing concern to many parents out there. This practice is rooted in other sub-Saharan cultures as well. In South Africa, for instance, sponsors are known as blessers, and the term is a part of a popular culture and lingo amongst young people. Millicent Rono, a psychologist and a parent, says certain factors contribute to the sponsor culture, such as unemployment, broken family relationships, need for the youth to acquire money fast, have contributed to the rise in the sponsor culture.
There is a way, subtly, as parents or as caregivers, we are pushing our children towards that kind of direction. Yeah, and then there is also pressure, the peer pressure, and the fact that we all want to get rich quick. We've lost the value of working hard.
Psychologists say the groups largely affected by this culture include college and university students aged between 18 to 23 years, graduates seeking employment opportunities, and older single women and men. So just how do we change the narrative and bring up a different breed of youth?
I find that young ladies, the ones I deal with, can be very difficult once they're adamant about the direction they're taking. Sasa ukiwaambia what you're doing is wrong, the more they'll do it. So most of the time you let that pan out. You let them hit a point where it's not working. They are unhappy about the relationship they are in. Yeah? And then now you start talking to them from that angle and from that perspective. But you have to want to change.
According to Patricia Acero, the chair of the International Community of Women Living with HIV, the culture is not new, but has only evolved over time.
I think the name has just changed, and the name is now the sponsor. And because of social media, it has been hyped.
Patricia warns that this lifestyle could be damning to the lives of those involved in the future if this belief system goes unchecked. The risk of acquiring HIV, she says, is also higher owing to these relationships. With the National AIDS Control Council, NACC, previously reporting that HIV prevalence for women in Kenya stood at 7%, as opposed to 4.7% for men. With rising unemployment levels in Kenya and around the African continent, more young people will feel alienated from economic opportunities. And the sponsor route could offer a quick solution for their current predicament. But at what cost? Miriam Nyambura, Citizen TV.
All right, we'll be talking about the blessers and sponsors culture in just a bit as this crisis continues to rise. 2 people every hour. So by the time we're done with this show, 2 people will already be infected with HIV and AIDS, and nobody's talking about it. We'd like to find out, how do we ensure that this conversation is a priority? At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Monday Report. I see a lot of your feedback. I'll get into them in just a bit. But let's start off with a real life situation. And Brian, I'll come to you. Brian Murioki, you're only 22. Walk us through your journey. How did you discover what happened, and what is the way forward from here? What would be your advice to the young people watching you tonight?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Murioki Wanjiru. I'm the County Secretary of Maisha Youth. I'm also the President of OTZ Nakuru County, and I went more into the HIV status, into HIV issues among the youths, especially in Nakuru County. You see, Nakuru is one of the counties that we've been affected most by HIV, which I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Personally, we've been living with this, and at least we've been talking to youths who've been having this, and we've been having stories that are kind of difficult for some people to listen to. Also, apart from that, we've got issues of defaulting of the medication amongst the youths. There are serious issues that are behind this, which I think with the help of others who are with me here, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you discover the journey through this, if you're willing to talk about that? And what would be your advice to the young people who are watching you tonight, who most of them say they're more scared of pregnancy than HIV? What would be your advice to them?
One thing is that we've got parties. No, this is something that it's difficult to address.
Yeah.
Because there's no day that you'll tell people don't party. Parties are there, and we'll still party, no matter what. But one thing I will really advise on is let's have responsible parties. Parties that you know that you cannot be ashamed of talking about outside their society, especially the youths. Also, the issue of alcohol. That's one thing that, as much as we'll talk about it, no one will ever talk about it deeply. Just talk it like it's just a normal stuff. And then also, apart from that, I would really wish if African parents could talk about the issue of HIV and bring this issue on the table to their kids.
Yeah.
Because you see, one thing is that as in the African aspect, talking about parents and kids talking about sex, that's something that is prohibited in the African cultures. So I'll really advise the African parents, let's bring these discussions on the table so that the young generation that is coming up, at least they can be able to be knowing what's happening in life.
All right.
Yeah.
Becky, let me come to you on this. And what are the numbers telling us? Who is infecting who, and where is the infection most rampant?
Okay, so with regards to HIV infections in the country, or the HIV situation in the country, we have come a long way, obviously, and it's important for us to recognize that a lot of work has gone into the HIV response. So in terms of numbers, we have the prevalence in the country is at 4.4%, with the women being at a higher risk than the men. So the women's prevalence is at 5.7%, and then the men is at 3.1%. So it's a significant difference. So obviously showing that the women in the country, and the young women specifically, because when you look at the new infections, again, it's the young women who are contributing more of the infection. So we have about 14,000 new infections among 15 to 24, who are the young adults that we're discussing today. So obviously the women are at higher risk of infection, and they're bearing the brunt of HIV in the country, and it's something we need to start actively discussing, because even just as we're having these conversations with teenage pregnancies, it's still the young women. So, you know, the infections are definitely higher among the young women and more than the men, but obviously their sexual partners are people who are in their age group, but also the sponsor conversation that's there, you know. So it's not just the older people who are infecting these young girls or the young boys, it's also among their peers. So that's where I think the problem is also.
So it's almost like a vicious cycle. It's everyone who's mixed in between.
It is everyone, really, because we can't just put the blame on the young boys, on the young men, or it's everyone, really. Yes. So, you know, it's both generational, but also among their peers.
All right. Mike, as the host county, what are the numbers showing here in Nakuru where we are?
Thank you, Trevor. First, to put perspective, I lead the county teams of program managers. And I recognize I have a colleague here called Rachel for this county, Nakuru. But in that context, looking at the program response across the country, just to build on what my colleague has shared, Kenya has a prevalence of 4.5%. That means 5 out of every 100 people are HIV positive. Nakuru is close to that at 3.7%. This varies across the country. Nakuru's epidemic seems to be a picture of Kenya. Most of the figures here are the average for Kenya. And that 3.7% for Nakuru, for example, you know, in Kenya, we are talking about 1.5 million people living with HIV. And mark you, this is a chronic disease. We are glad we are out of stigma. There is hope for everyone living with HIV out there. We have ART, and our government and stakeholders are up to the task. For Nakuru, we have 58,000 estimated PLHIV in this county of Nakuru. In addition to that perspective, is whereas in the country we have identified about 1.2 million people who are on ART, that's ARVs. The picture in Nakuru, close to that, still a gap to go. We are about 42,400 on ART as at now. Is that important? Yes, because for Nakuru we are talking of about 16,000 people living with HIV who don't know they're HIV positive and who likely are of unsuppressed viral load, and who it means any sexual encounter will mean transmission to the next person. And that speaks to the risk you're talking about, this transmission. The perspective still here, as my colleague has shared, we're talking that among our AYP, age 15 to 24, account for about a third of all the new infections in the country and even locally, a third. So 1 out of 3. Here we mean people who are HIV negative in January, and by December they got infected through various exposures. So nationally, that's about 14,000 out of the 42,000. For Nakuru here, we estimate that we get about 1,800 new infections, like in the closed year. So we're saying out of that, 600 or so were among just 15 to 24. This is a picture that, as we speak tonight, I pray that we start this conversation to a higher level. I would even dare you say that we are underestimating this. If you look at some proxy like teenage pregnancy, nationally, by what's reported, we are looking at a situation where we have 300,000 plus. Actually, last year around 330,000. In Kenya, schoolgirls aged 10 to 19 who conceived in school. And these are numbers of those who reported to our facilities. You don't know those who didn't come for ANC. And Nakuru is not left behind. These numbers vary across the country. There are outliers on the extreme right, like Nairobi, Narok, and Kakamega. Nakuru is around 12,000. Yeah. We're seeing about 12,000 pregnant schoolgirls. Can you imagine our schoolgirls in uniform? 12,000 in one county of Nakuru, pregnant in 1 year. Why am I mentioning this? You know, HIV is an STI. Yeah. And by the time you have 12,000 pregnant schoolgirls, it means they had an unprotected sexual encounter. Yeah. And we might not pick that they're positive today because it takes time to seroconvert. And so this is a time bomb. And we know in some counties, this is worse. We're talking about 50% of all pregnancies being schoolgirls. For Nakuru, this is about 18-20% of the pregnancies reported in the year. We're looking at a new trend of other STIs apart from HIV coming with these pregnancies. And there's a baby there. Today we are seeing pregnancies. In the near future, we'll be seeing infertility coming out of this STI and HIV. So we have a problem, yes, and it's across the country. Nakuru is not left behind as we sit here in Nakuru today. And this conversation needs to start. All right. Yes.
Let me bring in Wilson on this. Wilson, walk me through the care process from the time someone is infected. How do they usually find out when they come to you? What is the next steps? Do they all come and get the medication so that they are depressed viral load, or some of them just go and disappear and you don't know where they even went?
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. A good treatment outcomes actually will rely on proper treatment preparation, especially during the initial stage. And the stage of treatment preparation actually begins during the post-test, as soon as you just identify that you're HIV positive, especially for those who got it longitudinally. And here, remember, we have actually two groups. The first group, I think I've just mentioned it. The second group is the group that got the virus, vertically, through mother to child. So after that, what we normally do, first of all, is to just ensure that we make the patient or the client be aware of what's happening. And the next thing that we have to assess is to, especially for adolescents, we'll have to look at the other factors that are surrounding, the environment. Here we are looking at the caregiver, because we've seen cases whereby lack or low literacy levels have contributed to poor outcomes. So first of all, we have to start with the caregiver, whom we'll have to empower with the knowledge on HIV care and treatment. And also with time, as the child grows, we also have to assess the nutritional status, so that we rule out any forms of growth retardation, because HIV being an immunosuppressive condition, it's associated with the growth retardation. Other than that, again, it will be also very, very important to start the process of disclosure, because that's where the nail beats the head, right? And therefore we'll start this process, especially at the age of between 4 to 7. That's where we start our early disclosure as the child grows. My brother over there mentioned an intervention which you call Operation 000. OTZ, sorry, that's just an acronym. So what it stands for is that it stands for actually 3 zeros. The first 0 meaning that that's a 0 missed appointment, then followed by 0 missed pills. Then we have the 0 viral load. The reason why we are coming up with this acronym is to make it easier for care and treatment, and also for this vulnerable age group to be able to understand the process of treatment. And you see, besides that, we have many other zeros. For instance, we have 0 deaths that will be contributed as a result of 0 viral load. And once you have a 0 viral load, what that means is that you can never transmit. Actually, it will be very difficult difficult for you to transmit the HIV infection into another person.
Okay.
Through that, again, we also have the other zero lost follow-up, as well as zero deaths.
Okay.
Daktari did mention something on I think he left something on mortality bit. And when you look at the mortality rate, especially for the age groups of 15 to 24 in Nakuru, that's the highest actually if compared to the age group of between 10 to 19. If I'm to take the absolute numbers, that's 103 vis-a-vis 75. That one tells you a lot on how the quality of care and treatment is actually being implemented across this age group.
Okay.
And to make it and to crown it all, we also have what we call the adolescent package of care, which also prepares our adolescents now from being children, now graduating to the adolescent stage, so that now with time, the adolescent package of care will be able to prepare them and transition into adulthood. And I think that's where we really need to really put our discussion around disclosure and the transition.
All right. Let me come to my audience and listen to you people. What do you think is causing this rise in infections? Is it a lack of parental guidance? Is it the information that is not flowing the way it's supposed to? I see you hold the mic. Just start with your name and tell us what do you think is causing this rise of infections and how can we reverse this?
Thank you so much. My name is Bernard Luga. I would say that one of the reasons why we are having new high rates of infection among the youth is lack of knowledge. There's a perception which is wrong that the youth have the knowledge about HIV and AIDS, but sometimes that knowledge is not sufficient. So one thing that we need to do is to provide age-appropriate information so that we are able to curtail this problem at a very early age or stage.
Age-appropriate information.
Yes.
What would that look like? Because back in the day when you were growing up, did you have information about HIV? Was it any different?
Thank you so much, Trevor. I think the way the message was packaged back then was a little bit different. So we need to look at the way we are packaging the message that goes to the youth.
Okay.
Back then we would have posters working. But if you ask me how many people would stand somewhere and read a poster which has information, you'll find it's very few people. And hardly the youth will do that. They mostly operate on the social media platform and so forth. So we need to have information in a manner that they will be able to benefit from it and make sense out of it. When I say age-appropriate information, what I mean is that HIV is real, and there's no need of hiding it. As Brian alluded, that African parents are having a problem discussing sex with their children or talking about it. Now, that should not be a problem at this time because we need to communicate the information that is real. HIV is there with us, and we need to inform them as early as possible that HIV and AIDS is there. Thank you.
There's another microphone back there. Just who has the microphone here? Start with your name.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. My name is Beatrice Kabugi.
Very slightly louder.
My name is Beatrice Kabugi.
Yes.
A young mother living with HIV. The reason as to why we are having new infections among our young adolescents, I think there is the issue of disclosure and stigma. You get that these young people, they are not being disclosed to their HIV status early enough. So when these young people goes back to school, and we get to see that sex is everywhere nowadays, they practice sex. You get that infected youth doesn't know his or her status, but he'll just go sleeping with any girl or any man that she comes around. There is also the issue of stigma. Stigma among our youths. You get that they feel stigmatized, so they just need to go and they need to have a revenge of why did I have to get infected? If I'm infected, I have to make another youth get infected. So they spread among themselves.
Thank
you.
And would you blame parents on this? Is there a lack of parental guidance from your view?
Okay, fine. Yeah, parental guidance, it's lacking. Because actually, as I was growing up, I never had such discussions of sex with my parents. So I think if I had such discussions, I would have known that having sex and maybe unprotected sex, it's wrong. So I could have gone a step ahead and protect myself. So I think parents should come on board, discuss boldly with their children about sex at an early age. Because nowadays you get that even children, girls as young as 10 years, they are sexually active. So parents should talk about sex openly with their children.
All right. The microphone is still here. How do we reverse these infection rates from your view? Just start with your name.
Thank you so much, Trevor. And I'm glad to be here in this meaningful engagement. And I think we can start by treating this issue as a we can start by framing cases to treatment as child rights violation, whereby there is this factor of age or consent for a child or a young adolescent to seek treatment services. So when we treat this as or reframe it as a child rights violation, we can follow up with the state or caregivers so that they can treat it as a child rights violation.
Okay.
Thank you.
The microphone is still back there. I'll come to you, Brian, in just a bit. Start with the name, sir.
Thank you. My name is Karanja Kiromo.
Yes, Karanja.
And I think, Trevor, I think we need to have a paradigm shift.
Yes.
Because the question is, why is it that a youth sitting outside there in this country has the information about what is HIV, the consequences, but again, with that information, goes ahead and endangers him or herself. Therefore, we need to have a paradigm shift and think of utilization of the information that these people have. Why is it that they have the information and yet they are not utilizing that information? So that now we start focusing on the factors that are making the information not to be utilized. And then maybe, just maybe, we could have a drop in these new cases.
So according to you, this information is available, it is just being ignored?
It is available because from primary school all the way to secondary, all the way to university, you'll be shocked that even universities, they do teach common university course. Sometimes they are called UCUs, called HIV and AIDS. Therefore, this information is there, but it is either being ignored or they just fail to utilize the information that they have.
Okay. Brian, is that the case? Do people know this information, they're just choosing to ignore?
Yeah, we are living in a society whereby a lot of people are ignorant. Then again, I think we also have to curb it in terms of young kids. Let's start an early disclosure to these kids so that we can curb the problem of denial. See, when after there's a proper disclosure, an early disclosure, when this kid is growing up, there'll be few people who will be in denial. That is because you find in some facilities, you find a lot of youths who are having high viral loads. Most of them are in denial. They have the questions within themselves. Then they have also self-stigmas amongst themselves. I think when we start an early disclosure, we're going to curb these problems of, I think, the self-denial, self-stigma, such kind of cases.
Okay. Where's Kimani Gisheru? Kimani Gisheru, if you can just pass the microphone to Kimani there. What is the role of the church when it comes to talking about these conversations with the young people and of also imparting knowledge and information to the young people and even the moral fabric that we keep talking about? What is the role of the church in all this?
Thank you, Trevor. I am Kimani Gicheru, a youth leader from Kenya Assemblies of God Nakuru Christian Center. Now, the church plays a major role in HIV and AIDS. In our country where 80% are Christians, in the church we preach abstinence. We preach abstinence, and that's the standard. We preach sexual purity, and that is the standard. So we are major stakeholders and we are major players of controlling HIV and AIDS. But with that being the case, HIV and AIDS still spreads in the church. it is still there. And unfortunately, due to the nature of what we believe in, matters HIV and AIDS, discussions about HIV and AIDS in churches, especially amongst the youth, they are not common. In the church where I go to, there was a day we had a meeting and we had a very heated debate. And the topic was, is it okay to discuss matters contraceptives? Is it okay to discuss matters sex in church? Our standard is abstinence. But the truth is, HIV is also in the churches. So I think slowly by slowly, we need to be more open-minded towards such discussions. We need the leaders of the church to be more open-minded towards the discussions of HIV and AIDS, because the truth is it's still there and it's still ravaging the church.
All right, I'll come back to you in just a bit. Becky, how do we change this narrative now?
Thank you. So just listening, what I'm getting is that yes, there's information, it's just that there's no behavior change. Like, we've put out the information, it's just that it doesn't, I guess, it goes back to the question of, is HIV still relevant anymore? And then should we then, especially for the young population, should we then make HIV a priority for them in a way that makes sense for them? Because you see, as it is right now, when you speak to young guys, it's usually that, okay, so you're telling me if I get HIV, I'll be fine. I'll just be on medication and then I'll be okay, right? So then what's there to be afraid of?
Risk?
You know, so what is the risk? So in terms of that, then we have a risk perception among the young guys that's significantly low, which means that then even, no matter how many times we say the same things, no matter how many different ways we say the same things, ultimately their perception is still low and it won't change. And I think that we need to start making HIV a priority for young people in a way that makes sense for them. When you have conversations, and I think this is where the young people who are living with HIV are an important part of this conversation, because they are living the experience and they're the ones who are able to tell other young people that, you know what, maybe this is not as great as it looks, you know, because yes, you live a healthy, full life, but is it okay to take a pill every day at a certain time, at a certain prescribed time, and it doesn't stop? It's forever. And that's something that maybe a young person will listen to and be like, okay, maybe I really don't want to do that, because antibiotics you never finish. It's 7 days. You're told to take your dawas for 7 days, you never finish. But then if it is something that makes sense to them, that, you know, maybe these drugs have certain side effects that are not particularly enjoyable, you know, or things like that, that might make sense to a population of young guys. Because as it is, I don't think the risk perception is there at all. Because just last weekend, Vasha, no one was, they know there's HIV, they know there's STIs, they know there's teenage pregnancies. Someone mentioned alcohol, but the masses were streaming in, regardless. So is it relevant to them anymore? And how do we then make it relevant for them in a language that makes sense to them?
Mike, how do we increase the risk perception without increasing stigma? Because, you know, the only other option that you have is to tell people that if you have HIV, this is how you're going to live your life, and this is the end result. In the process, you might raise stigma as well.
Thank you, Trevor. I think Trevor and Kenya, these are dialogue we should have now. And the first thing is to realize we have a problem. Do we have a problem? Yes, we do. We have a case where our young people are getting infected and we risk losing those who are not adherent. And as my colleague has said, if you have to choose between being on lifelong treatment and living your life without treatment, I'm a medical doctor, you know which choice to take. So as we come to that perception, then let's start the conversation this way. This will require a multi-sectoral approach. I would list about 7 in the list sectors, but let me start with health sector, where I belong, so that if time doesn't allow, but I'll have to mention the others. That first is good for us to know that you can have your lifestyle and not get HIV. And the basic, let's get to the beginning. The ABC is not yet expired. And by the way, Trevor, we need to celebrate many of our young people who are abstaining. I think the environment has not allowed us to talk about this majority of young people. There are so many young people out here who are living in abstinence. And that way you're good to go, no HIV. If you must have sex, then let's remember B and C. Let's remember fidelity to relationships, and let's remember the correct, consistent use of condom. It's still good for that